Nice to see you today. And so we can start, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of today is just to meet you guys and to have a discussion about the options that the homeowners with the high equity in homes are having, like as for today. So we are dealing with different challenging times, like on the market, like the news they keep surprise us every day, but we should follow actually what's going on to help our clients, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, because the information what we will share today is supposed to help many other people who will think about like what is 1031 exchange, what is home equity loan, and how the people with the high equity homes they can how can they use it in like, for them. So let me first quickly share you the screen. Like this is just the slide I want to show you. Where is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
you got my slides too, right? I sent.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
I'm not seeing any screen sharing for now.
Yeah, okay. Give me a second. What can you see now? Do you
Nothing.
see some? Nothing. Okay. We
Uh,
will cut it out.
to approve my sharing screen, I have the slides. Maybe I can share them.
Sure. Okay. Do you
Okay.
s- do you see now?
Um, do you see my screen share? Right now, I'm sharing. Do you see it?
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
So you're seeing, right?
Good.
Okay.
Do you
So
want me to move over to the second slide? I think we all froze.
yeah. Kyle, do you see your slides?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, could you please tell us a little bit more about what you're doing?
About like 1031 exchange.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go to the first slide here, the next slide. So 1031 exchange basically allows an investor to sell an investment property, like we'll say a rental in this case, for example, and use all the equity to reinvest into a new property, like another rental, maybe land, right? Some sort of investment property. Uh, so they can actually build wealth, reinvest the proceeds, and defer the taxes when they buy new investment property through a 1031 exchange. Our job as what's called a qualified intermediary is to hold funds for the duration of the 1031 exchange. You have to have a qualified intermediary when you do a 1031 exchange. So we're kind of like escrow. I mean, clients still have escrow set up, title and escrow. When they close a transaction, it's just we will hold funds for the duration until they're able to find a new property to purchase. Yeah. And if we go to the next slide here, a lot of people want to know, well, what's the tax rate going to be? What am I going to pay in taxes? Um, Most importantly, as it says kind of in the middle there, consult with a CPA because what anyone would pay on taxes varies, right? Um, Long-term capital gains is 15 to 20%. Depreciation, which is like a big tax write-off you get on your investment property, like your rental, for example, that's taxed at 25%, the recapture from that. The net investment income tax is a newer tax, about 6 or 7 years old, and that's 3.8%. And then state taxes vary. Washington state excise tax is always paid. So again, most importantly, like the asterisk says in the middle, consult with a CPA to figure out your exact tax liability. But this is an example, just a generic example, just so people can see the concept of what a 1031 exchange is. So on the left-hand side, uh, let's just say that we cash out. We don't do a 1031 exchange, but we end up buying a new property. So we sell for 800,000 and we'll just say there's 200,000 gone for taxes, which leaves us 600,000 to reinvest. And if we buy a new property, let's say that we buy a couple properties that total 2.4 million. That's great. Like we bought more real estate, but we ended up paying 200,000 in taxes. So in a 1031 exchange, at the next example on the right, if we defer our taxes in a 1031 exchange, we get to reinvest that full 800,000. So using the exact same LTV as the previous example, that 2.4 million turns into 3.2 million, just because we did the 1031 exchange. So this is a real tangible view of what a 1031 looks like in theory. Obviously, everyone's numbers are different. Some people can even pay higher tax than that. Some people pay lower taxes. Some people don't even need to do a 1031 exchange. So most importantly, discuss with your CPA and find out what your tax liability is and if a 1031 makes sense or not. So in a 1031, there's a couple rules and guidelines to follow. With a 1031, you have 45 days to identify new property to purchase. So day zero, what starts the 45 and 180-day clock is close of escrow. So when you go down to title and escrow and close the transaction, transfer the property to another person in your sale, that's when the clock starts. So you have 45 days to find new property. We call that identify, and 180 days to close. With identification, you have to let us know in writing what you intend on purchasing. And you have to let us know by day 45. There are no extensions outside of federally declared disasters. So if you find something on day 40 and it changes on day 47, you're out of luck because you can't actually change the 1031 identification after day 45. So basically, once you close on your sale, you have 45 days to figure out what you're going to buy, and you ultimately have 180 days in total to close on what you've identified. Make sure, if there's anything to remember today, that everyone has to set up their 1031 before close of escrow. Ideally, once you're under contract and escrow set up, but if the transaction's closed, it's too late to set up a 1031 exchange. There's nothing we can do. As much as we want to help clients that call 3 hours after their transaction closed, there's nothing we can do because once it's closed, it's too late to set up the 1031. So this is a real broad overview of 1031s. It's relatively straightforward in the sense that when you're buying new investment property, you're really just doing two things. You're buying for equal or greater value to what you sold for, and you're reinvesting all the money or proceeds that come into the exchange. So if you sell a rental for, say, 800,000 and have 500,000 in proceeds that come in after the loan's paid off, as long as you buy for at least 800,000 and reinvest all 500,000 in proceeds, you'll have what's called a successful 1031 exchange and defer all the applicable federal taxes. So that's 1031s in a nutshell. Obviously, there can be more nuance to this when there's like partnerships involved and stuff, but for most clients that are buying and selling like rentals, for example, it's relatively straightforward. They just need to let us know once they're under contract and then find new property to purchase.
Could you
Excellent.
please tell a little bit more, sorry, about likewise rule? Like if you sell the house, what can you buy?
Yeah, you can buy any type. You're selling investment property, and you can buy any type of investment property. So this could be, you can actually buy rentals. You could buy land. You could buy commercial. Um, you can really get off into the weeds too with other things like some states water rights would qualify, timber rights in some states, mineral rights. So as long as it's investment property and taxed as investment property, taxed as real property, it's exchangeable.
Hey, Kyle, quick question. So let's say you've sold a real estate worth of 500,000 and you buy five properties, 100,000 each. Does that meet the 1031 exchange criteria?
Yep. Yep, absolutely, because you're buying for equal or greater value, and you can buy multiple properties too. Some people buy multiple properties. A lot of people are going to sell one and buy one, maybe buy a couple. But yeah, in your scenario, that would absolutely work.
Okay. And then on the previous slide, you mentioned that this is a new tax, net investment income tax. What is that?
So that came about, I think, in 2018, if I remember correctly, with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. But that's tied to the affordable health care tax.
Mhm.
So it's basically a 3.8% tax. I believe currently it's above a $200,000 gain if you're single or 250,000 if you're married. You'd pay 3.8% above that. And that's for any asset sale. That could be investment real estate, stocks. um, what have you. But again, to see if you would qualify to pay that, definitely talk to a CPA.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. What would be the best scenario for the homeowner who actually resides in the house, but like they just trying to understand how is it possible to sell the house and use, this equity for something? Like, can they convert like their primary house into the rental to buy a new house? Maybe they will need like an equity loan, and then, to buy something at the end, they can rent out to other people.
So yeah, if someone has a huge gain in their primary residence, they could move out of it, turn it into an investment property for 2 years, then do a 1031 exchange, but they'd have to buy a new investment property. They couldn't buy a primary residence with it. So yeah, primary residences don't fall under section code 1031, unfortunately. But if someone actually wants to has a big gain and wants to use it as part of 1031, they would need to rent their property out for 24 months, do a 1031 exchange into a new investment property for 24 months after that, and then they could theoretically move into it after that. So there's definitely a process to it, but that would fall under definitely under like tax planning and financial planning. So another thing they'd want to talk to their CPA about as well.
That's a good plan.
Yep. Yeah, it can definitely work. You're just it just unfortunately is not for primary residences, but a lot of people in the Seattle area, for example, or like the Bay Area, they have big gains, like huge gains in their property, and 1031 makes a lot of sense. So they'll move out for 2 years, turn it into an investment property and do a 1031 exchange into a new investment property. And maybe a few years after that, move into it. So yeah, there's definitely some ways around
And you mentioned
to
that
work.
when you transfer the gain and you buy another property with the 1031, you have to rent it out for 2 years, obviously, and
Mhm.
then theoretically you can move into that and then essentially sell another 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. And what then you're going to be exempt at least for depending on your marital status for a certain amount of the gain
Yeah, so if you were to eventually sell it down the road,
as a primary residence at that time because you've purchased it as an investment, kept it
yeah,
for 2 years, then you've
yeah.
moved in. Let's say you've lived in that property at that point for 2+ years, and then
Mhm.
it becomes your primary residence. I
Yeah,
take it.
you'd need to actually live in it for 3 years in that scenario if you rented it for the first two. Um, so that's kind of a complicated equation. It falls into like what are called prorated versus non-prorated years. I generally just tell people that you can probably get rid of some of the taxes, but you'll also pay some of the taxes. Um, it's definitely something that they would want to talk to their CPA and figure out exactly what their tax liability is. So yeah, they can get rid of some of the taxes, but they're going to pay some taxes too.
That's it. That's a good approach.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's actually was the idea of getting this discussion because one of my clients who is single and like she has almost like $1 million in in equity. So and she wants to downsize, but she's like, how can I downsize? That's just, you know, the cut of like almost 30-50% of the price.
Hmm.
So that's why.
Yeah, so it depends on what their total gain is, but yeah, some people it makes sense to move out for a couple of years, turn it into a rental and investment property, do a 1031 exchange into a new investment property, and then just wait 2 years after that to move into it. But that's kind of a long time for some people to, wait to have a, a true primary residence, 4 years. But yeah, they'd want to talk to a CPA and figure out what their tax liability is and if something like that would make sense.
Yeah, that was what I said. I also advised to ask you, because that's very important to get the consultation from someone who is the professional in the area.
Sure. Yep. Yep.
Okay, Ilya, can you tell us a little bit more about equity loans?
Sure. Yeah, equity loans, you typically You can get them against your primary residences or investment properties. Most likely banks will want you to occupy the property in order to land on it. But you could access up to typically 80% of the value. So for instance, let's say that today's value of a home is 500,000. You have to typically leave 20% in the as an equity. So that's 100,000 and be eligible for $400,000 total outstanding loan balance. Let's say your existing loan is 300,000, you're allowed to have 400,000, then you're going to get access to $100,000 line of credit. It works almost just like a credit card, except for it's collateralized by your house. So unlike the credit card, which is unsecured debt, you go bankrupt, bank cannot collect on you. But with the home equity line of credit, it's attached to the home. So if you do go bankrupt or you stop making payments, then you potentially could face the potential foreclosure or repossession of the home. Technically speaking, that money is yours. You could go buy a car, you can go to a casino, blow the full $100,000, or you could utilize it wisely, maybe go buy an investment property or another house, I guess, for your own needs, however you want to use it. Typically, it's whatever balance you have outstanding, that's what you pay your interest on. So if you have a line for 100,000, but you've only used 20,000 of it, then you only get the interest gets charged on that outstanding balance, which is the 20,000. That's pretty much how that works. There are a few banks that will allow you to have an equity loan on an investment property from the local banks. I know that First Tech Credit Union used to do it. They would lend you on the investment property, and Home Street Bank would do it, but they cap you at a 70% loan to value. So you would have to leave 30% equity in the house in order to be eligible, and obviously subject to higher rates and things like that.
And what would be usually the interest rate for this kind of loan?
Tied to a prime rate. I do believe we haven't had any hikes recently, so I do believe a prime rate is still at 7.5. Depending on your credit, you may get a premium on top of it. So, for example, let's say your credit score is 700, just as an example, your rate may fluctuate and be equal to 8%. But typically, on the lines of credits, you don't fix the rate. It's usually a variable rate for the duration of the first 10 years. However, some banks do offer you to pick, so you pull out. So let's say they offer you $100,000 line of credit and you only need 20 for your own needs. Then you can typically, with the local bank BCU, they allow you to lock in the rate on that portion of the money that you pull out. So for instance, $20,000 gets locked at a certain rate over this certain time frame, and you just start making those payments. Not all the banks do that. So typically, like I say, it's usually amortized as an interest-only payment over the course of first 10 years. That's when you can draw against your line, you can pay it back fully or partially. And then if you still have a balance after 10 years, you've got to be paying down the principal.
Okay, I see. Like, let's say someone wants to downsize, and you are the lender who actually owns like the mortgage, who lend the mortgage. So, what papers the potential buyer who wants to downsize and to buy a new one, and you to use this line of credit, what they supposed to bring you? What kind of papers?
Typically, lines of credits are just like your traditional loans. I mean, it's typically full documentation type of, we call it full doc loans. Tax returns if they're self-employed for the past 2 years, or in some instances for 1 year. And then W-2s if they're, not self-employed, current pay stubs. So lines of credits are, from my knowledge, are only it could be granted to you as a full documentation loan. I don't think you can get a line of credit without providing your full package.
Okay. Kyle, also like have a question. What if like someone just rents the house to own kids?
So they would have to charge their kids technically fair market rent to make it an investment property. Yep. So if their kids just live there for free, that's personal use. It's like they're living there. So yeah, they definitely want to charge fair market rent. Um, if they want to use it as an investment property in a 1031.
Yeah, that's actually like the case, my client's case. So that's why I'm just using the opportunity and discuss,
Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah, and
scenario.
that's super common. But yeah, if they want to do a 1031, there needs to be fair market rent charged and paid.
Good.
Yep.
Like as for me, I'm seeing a huge value actually in the strategy we discussed today. Of course, as you mentioned, that like CPA is the first person like who like the people supposed to talk, but there are some options because the process of getting them assets and investing is like long-term process, and we are hitting the different cycles of the market. So, but it doesn't change actually the idea, right? Like how to
Mhm.
make like more profit, how to gain these assets and to multiply them instead of losing the opportunities we are having in our hands, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Yeah, and I hope this video will help someone. I'm sharing your contacts everywhere, so I hope you will find the clients who will appreciate your professionalism.
Awesome. Thanks, Oksana. Thanks, Ilya.
My
Thank you.
best to you.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.
Thank you.